Hello and welcome my partners in crime, and welcome back to another true crime case. Now this is solved really, and you'll find out after how, but yeah, it's a solved case. It's an interesting case. It's going to start some debate, and I hope it does, but we're really talking about this case in different ways. Alright, it's going to bring out some emotions, I would say, in people, because I've named it the vigilante paedophile killer. Now I've named it that because that's what he was. Exactly what he was. And Stephen A. Marshall, because we have a Stephen Marshall and the other killer, this Stephen Marshall is a USA case, and that's really what he did. So before we carry on with this case, would you like to subscribe? You can hit the like button, you can hit the notification bell button. And I want to dedicate this case because, as you know, I've just started my new super thanks, and the first person to do that was Punky Brewster 83. So I'm going to donate this. I'm going to dedicate this video to her, and we've had more, and people donate, and I'm so grateful for that. I really am. So I just wanted to mention you, and thank you for your first super thanks donation. I really appreciate it. So let's get on to this case. So as I've said, this is the vigilante paedophile killer, and Stephen Marshall, really, he was this 20-year-old, and he's I think when you talk about this case in a way, it is going to be emotional. There is going to be some responses of, oh yes, he's done great and this, that and the other. No, he hasn't, but there's more to that. We can't incite people to take the law into their own hands. It just doesn't work. Stephen Marshall was this 20-year-old. His background really was from not a bad family home at all. There was some movement from Canada to different states and stuff like this, and then back to the US and stuff, where this case took place. This case and these murders were taking place in Maine, in the USA, where he was visiting his father. So his life was good in a way, I suppose you could say. No one has said that there was any abuse or anything else, or any sexual abuse that may have made him go after paedophiles in such a way. But I think when we look at what was found after his arrest, should I say, we can see that his state of mind may not have been in the right place anyway. And sometimes we have to look now, when we look at this, you know, how these sex offenders registers really can result in vigilante murders. You know, sooner or later it was going to happen. It probably won't be the last one, to tell you the truth. And so we're going to talk about the registers themselves. We're going to talk about whether you think the registers are the right thing to do, to be put out there in public. Now I'll tell you now, in Canada they're not, and I think in this country you can look, there's certain ways you can go around it, but in America they are open, right? So he didn't hack into any systems, Stephen Marshall, to find the names of these predators. He didn't. He went on an open website which lists everything. It lists their age, who they are, where they work, any distinguishing marks, all this sort of stuff. Everything you would need to know about this person you could find from these open registers. Now this is where this case is going to really cause controversy, I think, because some people agree that this is the right thing to do, is to put these names out there to protect the public and the children in this area of where these perpetrators live, and others believe that they shouldn't, because the privacy laws, and you are putting out and these sort of details of these people, that then something like this can happen to them, right? So you have both sides, but also you may have people getting injured who are not what you think they are, and they could be innocent bystanders or other things like this. What could happen, right? So you have two sides to the story here, and I'm going to leave it up to you to what side you're on. Should they be public? Should they not? Why not? Why should they be? Do you see what I mean? So I think with this case, yeah, it is an eye-opening case, really, but it does happen. It does happen. So anyway, let's get on with it. So this is Stephen A. Marshall's case, and he was born on the 9th of August 1985, and he died, right, on the 16th of April 2006. So this is what I said to you, when this is a solved case, it's a bit of a twist to it. So he was an American-Canadian vigilante who searched public available sex offenders registers in the United States for the names and addresses of convicted sex offenders before travelling to Maine into the northern eastern United States and murdered 2 people. Now, yes, he did murder 2 people on that night, but also at that same time he had knocked on about 3 or 4 other doors of people on this register, but they didn't answer or they wasn't in, and that's what saved their life. So his list was of about, I think, 29 people on his list that he had a hit list, and that he was going to go through that hit list, and he got to 2 of them. So he was born in Fort Worth, Texas. So, and then I think he moved then over to Canada, Nova Scotia, I think in Canada he lived. In 1999, Marshall moved to Idaho with his father, Ralph, who was a serve-in mayor there. So he was, you know, that's what I'm saying, his family, he didn't have a bad upbringing on the out, he just didn't. There was no history, what they knew of sexual abuse, and we don't know if there was really, because boys don't always say, well, kids don't always say if there was from anyone else, but in the family, no, it didn't seem there was. Because he took his own life in 2006, before anyone could question him over what he'd done and why he'd done it, it's all assumptions. So it is said that he didn't have any history of being sexually abused as a child, but really that's other people saying that. We don't know, because he was never said and never did say, and now can no longer say. So that's open, I would say. But there was something, wasn't there, that made him do these crimes, that made this young lad really go out of his way to kill, to look at this website. And to tell you the truth, I'm telling you now, he weren't the only one looking at this website, but he was the only one at this point that acted upon it, of what he saw. He made his list, and he was determined that these people were going to die. So I think in 2001, I think when he was 15, he was charged with, I think it was aggravated assault. Now, he brought onto his lawn, so outside into the public, an AR-15 rifle, right? Where there was 2 young lads fighting, and he brought this rifle out and sort of, not threatened them, but I think he'd done it to shock. He'd done it to say, stop fighting, I've got this rifle. And that's why he was charged with that. So we don't know whether he had any thoughts of using it. I think with him, it was mainly the shock value of it. He's come out onto his lawn, you've got these people fighting, he's come out onto his lawn with his gun. That fighting soon stopped, but he was then done for aggravated assault with that rifle. Now, then his father, I think, went to live in Arizona, and then later moved to Maine. This is where he was visiting his father on that night, and we'll go into that night's details in a minute. And while his father was there and his mother lived in, I think, Cape Breton or Breton, he did attempt at one point to enlist in the army, but he was rejected because of his asthma. Now, there's a lot of issues now when we talk about this lad, when you think about this lad who's gone on to do this only a few years later. He's gone to go in the army. Now, he was obviously fascinated with guns. He liked guns, And in Texas and different states, you know, you can buy guns, but 15, he shouldn't have had this gun or been in any way able to get this gun. And that comes down then, I think, to the parents, doesn't it, really, when you think about it, that they need to be locked up and stuff like this in cabinets so these kids can't get to them. But then he wanted to join the army, and he was rejected from that. So there's another rejection. So we've had the mother and father split up in the 90s. I think 98 they split up. So a lot of kids do think it's their fault, even though their relationship was quite good, and he spent time between his mother's and his father's. So his mother in Canada and his father in the US. Then he's gone to join the army, another rejection, isn't it, really? You know, from asthma, something that you can't do. But you have to think, why did he want to join the army? Did he want to join the army because he felt that he would be able to belong to something then, really? And his fascination with guns would be fulfilled, you know, and he might get to kill people. You know, these are what thoughts maybe have gone through his head. But once that rejection come, then that was it. Then what? You know, now what? I'm going between, you know, America and Canada and this, that and the other. I can't even join the army. I think there was a little bit of depression or something would have set in there. And I think by what comes out later, after his death, you can see that there was some, I would say that there was some mental health issues along with that, definitely, with him leading up to that time. And it probably wasn't noticed, I don't think. I think he just got through life, and people are busy, aren't they? You know, especially when you're living between two houses. You may be doing something somewhere, the mother's not going to know and the father's not going to know you're going to do it there. I think he sort of slipped through a little bit. That's my feeling with Stephen Marshall, is that he just blended in, and he didn't like it. I think he wanted more out of life, and I think once he come upon then this website that you could, you know, this database, it gave him a purpose, you know, in his mind. That's now what he was going to do. So on the list, this list, when he started looking at what he was looking at, the areas he was looking at, there was 34 sex offenders on this list in this local area. And he took down 29 names and all their information about that, and started then to compile his kill list. That's what he did. And I'm telling you now, this boy wanted to kill all 29. He wasn't going to leave any alive. He was made up his mind. That's what he was going to do. So let's now turn to the night of these, how it started, these murders really. So it was Easter Sunday, 2006, this happened. And he was a dishwasher, I think, in Nova Scotia. So he had menial jobs, right? As I said, he couldn't get in the army. So he's in this car, this dishwasher, that's all he was. Menial jobs. He was a dishwasher. He was coming from Nova Scotia. He had going to visit his father, who lived in Maine, on this Easter Sunday, 2006. 3 guns by his side and his laptop with these, I think he had 34 names on there, but he had 29 in detail. 29 in detail, every detail about these people. This boy was now on the killing trail. He was about to start. So it was pre-planned, premeditated. It was premeditated. So we're having to look at this Stephen Marshall, right? So he hadn't seen his father in quite a while. He was this 20-year-old. He was driving now from his home in Canada on this rare visit to his father, who lived in Maine. When he got there, I think his car had broken down, something had happened. And he spoke to his father and everything. The father had gone to bed, but the father didn't realise that he'd taken his truck. Right? Once he'd waited for that father to go to sleep, and he took that truck. And the other thing that you've got to think about is the list that he was looking at. This sex offenders register list was for the United States, was for the area of Maine. They're the names that he'd wrote down, because in Canada they can't get access to that. It's not like that in Canada. So this rare visit, I think, was pre-planned. He was going to see his father as a ruse to kill 29 people. because these were detailed lists that this man had. Detailed lists. And he knew. But Easter Sunday is relevant here. It's really a relevant day. But that's when he took that father's car. Once that man went to sleep, he got in his car with 3 guns in that truck, with 3 guns by his side and his laptop. And he set off then on his killing rampage. And I think also, by the way, he didn't leave through the front door, right? He then, once he didn't want to wake his father, he didn't want any confrontation with his father, he knew what he was going to do, so he slipped out of the window at about 3 a.m. in the morning. So this was early hours now of Easter Sunday 2006, when this boy now is in the car. He's now heading towards his first victim, and I think that was around his first stop was about 2 hours southwest of the town of Milo in Maine, and 50-year-old Joseph Gray was asleep in his living room. He'd been, I think, watching Forensic Files and with his wife, and she was woken by the sound of the dogs barking and stuff like this, and he was shot and through the living room window. So it's just like, you know, and I think she just stood helpless, because I mean, he knew everything about these people. He knew they had family, he knew where they lived, he knew their addresses, everything, the descriptions, what the man looked like. So that was the day really, and the time about just after 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, that the first victim, this was this Joseph Gray, was murdered by him. Then he gets in his car and off he goes, and speeds off onto the next one on his list. But he had gone to a few more, as I've said in the beginning, that didn't answer the door, that he couldn't find, that wasn't there, and they had lucky escape, really, because he would have killed them as well. So this was from 3 a.m. he'd left the father's, he drove a couple of hours, killed then Joseph Gray. Then he'd then reached a few other houses, nothing, about 4 they think he'd gone to, couldn't kill them, and about 8 o'clock then he'd reached now his second victim. Now 24-year-old William Elliott, he answered the door with his in his mobile home, and this was in Coffreth in Maine. Our Marshall knocked on the door actually, and he opened the door, and that was it. Marshall just shot him, and he really fell to the ground, and I think he shot him a few times. And he had a girlfriend living there with him, and as Marshall drove off, she took the registration plate of, you know, his number plate, and called police. So that was it. Gray and Elliott were then the 2 victims off this list that he'd actually got to. Now this list held the actual whole list of the 38 and then the 29 that he took out, held around 2,200 names on it of Maine's online sex offenders register, right, in 2006. 2,200 in this area. So for someone like Stephen Marshall, a vigilante, what he wants to be called, or he sort of believed he was, a killer of paedophiles, you know, this boy could have done some damage. And I don't know why he homed in on just 29. It's not really clear why them 29 stood out to him out of 2,200. So I do believe that maybe something had happened to him when he was younger, which no one knows about, because it was specific sort of people, or the local people that he was after. Do you see what I mean? To take out from, you know, 29 out of, well, 34, but then only really detailed 29 out of 2,200 paedophiles within this area. There's a reason why he's specifically gone for that 29, isn't it? Really, it's quite clear, because the list was so random when you think about it. He could have just gone from one of 2,200, couldn't he? But he didn't. He thought about it, he made his list, the planning was there. He enjoyed that planning, he thought about what he was going to do, how he was going to do it, to these 29 individuals that he's singled out as the people that he wanted to kill. So let's talk about this register, right? This register was the state government's most popular website. The most popular website at that point in 2006. These people with 2,200 names on it was the most popular website for hits. So when I say that Stephen Marshall wasn't the only one looking, it had about 40,000 hits per day. Per day. Which would have told you everything about every paedophile in this area. These 2,200 names on this register. They were there for a reason. And there were sex offenders and different things. So it wasn't just paedophiles, right? And we'll look at some of these cases. But you know, there's some things what's happened from this, and I mean it's up there, and it tells you everything, identifying you know, your address, where you worked, and this is what he went through. So I do think it was specific, these 29. There was a reason, but as I said, he wasn't the only one looking. 40,000 hits per day. So anyway, we're talking, you know, let's get back to this case now really, and what's happened after this. So we've just said that the girlfriend has now took his registration plate number, so now the police know who they're looking for, don't they? His truck then, I think he abandons the truck, and then he jumps on a local bus. He takes his, I think he leaves the two of the guns and takes a gun. He also takes his laptop. He gets on the bus, he sits at the back of the bus. The police are now chasing him. They know you know who he is. He knows they know. He knows he's being chased. He takes the gun out, puts the gun under his chin, and shoots himself and kills himself. So this is what I mean. We can't ask him why. We can only, you know, think or have theories of why. And when you look at, this is why I'm saying it's so important on the day, Easter Sunday, because what they found then on his computer was images, drawings of God with, you know, guns and machine guns and different things knocking on people's door. I think Stephen A. Marshall, this young lad, this 20-year-old dishwasher from Nova Scotia area, who travelled to Maine to see his father, right, had some, you know, did he believe, because I do believe he had mental health, does he believe that he was doing God's will because of the day it happened, and because of then this, you know, these drawings and stuff that he'd done, and he had them on his laptop, of a godlike figure standing at the door? You know, that could be one theory, couldn't it? But we don't know. We don't know, do we? We do know, though, that throughout his life, his young life, he felt, I think, a bit, you know, when he couldn't be in the army and stuff, he was a bit rejected. He was doing a very menial job that he thought may have been menial. Lots of people do dishwashing jobs because they like what they're doing. And they usually start off, especially in your, you know, 1920s, you are, you know, working these menial jobs as you work your way up in life and through your education. I think that got to him. As I said, he did have a relationship with his father, he did, but he didn't have a close relationship towards the end. He hadn't seen him in a while. He knew this database, he found this database that only could be accessed, and that, you know, all this detail could be found in America. And of course he was American Canadian. He was born in Texas, so he could come and go as freely as he wanted, which he did. So he planned this. This was a pre-planned attack. But why? Right? But why? Many people don't like paedophiles. Most people don't like paedophiles, don't like sex offenders. We don't like them, right? We don't want them in our society. We don't need them near our children. We all agree on that, right? You know, most people do. But you don't go out, do you, and take the law into your own hands and start to kill them. You just don't, especially at 20. So what made him think to do that? That's the question. And unfortunately, that question cannot be answered because he took his own life at the end of it. He took his own life. Was he always planning to kill these 29 and take his own life? Probably, I would say. Probably, because he knew what was going to happen to him. He would have spent the rest of his life in prison for doing this. But you know, the young 24-year-old, Elliot, the younger one that he murdered, the second victim that he murdered, was on the sex offenders register, but he didn't abuse very young children. He was 24-year-old, and he had a girlfriend that was 15-year-old, and they had been together quite a while, but they'd waited to do anything. But just 2 weeks before her 16th birthday, they had slept together. They'd had a relationship together. Her father found out, which is fair enough because she was underage and that's the law. And of course he'd gone to court and he'd been put on then the sex offenders register. And that's the person out of the 2,200 people that he chose to do that to. But did he know that? Probably he knew that. But he took the life of that man as well. That girl, though, was under 16. They only had to wait 2 more weeks and there would have been no breach in the law at all. He wouldn't have broke the law at all. The other one, yes, was an abuser of girls under the age of 14, or a girl under the age of 14. That's different. He was also 57 at the time. And the other ones on his list, we could only imagine, can't we, of what they had done. So that's why I'm saying to you, Easter Sunday was relevant because of what was found on his laptop after he killed himself. And it's so difficult, isn't it, to put together really why. Fear isn't one thing, but we really never know. Was he abused as a child? We don't know. We don't know. Did he have mental health? Probably, but not necessarily. Really, we don't know. He was never diagnosed with anything, and we couldn't then assess him because, again, he took his own life. Why did he choose just a 29? Pacific? We don't know. We can't find out. So this is a strange case, really, this one. But it shows you sometimes that when we take the law into our own hands, it's not a good thing, really, you know, because sometimes people get it wrong. And I'm going to tell you about a few scenarios now of different cases where this has gone wrong. So we have these registers, and I think several jurisdictions across North America, sex offenders register laws are branded like names of Christopher's Law and Megan's Law. Now, Christopher Stevens was the namesake of the Ontario Sex Offender Register, and it was the first in Canada in 1988, I think. An 11-year-old, he was 11, was kidnapped and sexually assaulted and murdered by a convicted paedophile who was out of prison on statutory release. So this then starts these lists coming out and about, okay? Because Christopher had been kept alive for 36 hours before he was killed, it was believed that a database convicting sex offenders could have helped find him before, you know, he was murdered. Well, it could have, but in 1993 the coroner's inquest into the death recommended that starting one of a national scale, this would happen in December 2004, and 3 years after the Ontario launched their register. Unlike those in the United States, it remained hidden from public view. So that's what I'm saying. In Canada, even though they have sex offenders registers, which agencies can look at and police would know about, the public wouldn't. Where in the United States, that's totally different. Okay, so we have now different groups, because when you have registers that are not to public view, people want to know what's happening in their area. So you have now different groups, and I think it was the St. John's based group, and they were called the Sexual Abuse Network of Canada, and they created their own sort of register, really, for people to look at. And they would look at all the local news reports, this, that and the other, to compile their own list and put that out there. And there was like, on on Facebook groups and different stuff, websites and that, naming people and stuff like that. But you have to be so careful that you are getting your details right when you do these sort of things. So that was sort of one of them that really stood out. And actually it's a really good article, and I'll link this article in there, about the different crimes that's come out of doing this and coming and looking for paedophiles. You know, we have paedophile hunters everywhere, don't we? And entrapments and stuff. You're trying to entrap them, and you know, it's not entrapment if they, you know, they come to visit a child, right? It goes on a lot now. We have a lot of private people, and we have a lot of YouTubers actually doing it, that sort of stuff, because people are so frustrated, aren't they, with our laws, I think, especially in the UK, on how we manage you know, paedophilia, and also how we can stop it. So you're always going to have these sort of groups that are going to try and not, you know, they're within the law, without the doubt. They're certainly within the law, and they stick within the law because they want these people prosecuted. They are not vigilantes. They want these people named and shamed and put in prison. That's what they do. Vigilantism isn't good, because in the end, you know, if you get it wrong, you've hurt someone that you shouldn't have. 2, though, you've damaged your life, the life of your family, for something really that you can't really do nothing about. Do you see what I mean? The damage that you would create yourself and others in doing vigilantism isn't great. I'd like your opinion on that. This is open debate here really on this case, because everyone is going to have very strong opinions on that, and I know that, and I'm very interested in what you've got to say. So listen, in the United States, you're going to have these registers that are open, so you're going to have people that are harassing these people. Of course you are. They're going to be harassing, and there's harassment campaigns, and it even gets as bad as homicides, okay? It really does. It goes from the extreme, because people feel extremely deep about these issues, and some people, you know, who can't understand why this is going on, feel a great need to protect the children in society from this. So I can get that. I get that. But I think this Michael Dudau, I think his name is, in 2007, Ivan Garcia, Oliver spread the word amongst his neighbours in Lake County, California, in a trailer park, that he had discovered something shocking about this Michael, one of their new neighbours, and it was on the state offenders website. So Oliver feared for the safety of his young son, and Michael's listing licensed him. It included the offence of rape by force, oral rape, and a person under the age of 14 by force, right? Now, Michael had only been out of prison for 35 days. This is what it's saying. And this Oliver came over and literally stabbed him to death. He stabbed him literally to death, through the intention to protect Oliver's son from this man. And it was learned later that his crimes were against women. Well, his crimes were against women, right? But it sort of said that the person was under the age of 14. It was forced. So you're on a sex offenders register for different things. But this is what I'm saying. This neighbour becomes so concerned about his child. Listen, this man couldn't sleep. All he thought about, this man is going to hurt my child. And then he took the law into his own hands and he killed him. It turns out that the man didn't have any interest in boys at all. But it's a sort of another case. But, you know, this poor man now, one's dead, and you've got now another one whose son he was so worried about is now left without a father. The consequences for doing these things yourself is not good. Someone always going to lose here. You may have taken a predator off the streets, but you're now in prison with plenty more of them, and your son now is left without a father. That's what you've got to be thinking when we talk about vigilantism. There's always going to be a loss everywhere, and especially to the person who is the vigilante. There really is. and that's whether it's a loss of your life, like Stephen, who took his own life, or the loss of your liberty, where then your family are left to fend for themselves. It's never a good thing to take the law into your own hands. It really isn't. There's plenty of legal ways that you can go about taking these people off the streets. Plenty of ways. You don't need to do that at all. So listen, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this case. I know it's going to start a little bit of discussion, and I hope it does. I hope that you leave comments and talk amongst yourself. It's really good. I put a lot of stuff on the community page for you anyway, so you can see what's going on there. But in one way, I do feel sorry for Marshall. I do. He's a young lad. He was probably suffering at some form of mental health, where it ended in him taking his own life and the lives of others. It's a very sad case all round, really, isn't it? But I want to know what you think about these registrars, and whether you think you agree with them or you don't agree with them. I'd like to know what you think. It'd be really good. So, thanks for watching. Until the next time. Bye-bye.